Hello. First of all, I want to thank the folks at CUBE for asking me to speak today. I'd like to take my opportunity today here to reflect a bit on the changing nature of how we design and develop the software for the digital products of today and tomorrow, and the pressure that designing and developing smarter, more connected digital products put on all of us. I've also got an opportunity today to share with you how design and development teams around the world across multiple industries are adapting to the digital product challenge from some brand new survey data that's hot off the presses. And I want to thank the folks at CUBE for partnering with us at Forrester to make this possible. Let's get started. First, we've probably all heard the quote from Marc Andreessen about how software is eating the world. One of the results, massive growth in the market opportunity for smart, connected products. According to Fortune Business Insights, the global IoT market is currently in the midst of growing from $250 billion in 2019 to an estimated $1.46 trillion by 2027. That's a compound annual growth rate of 25%. Everywhere we look, we see the growth and importance of smart, connected products. Teams like yours deal with that reality every day and the complexity that it brings. To get some insight into how product teams are responding to these demands, Forrester Research was commissioned by CUBE to develop and execute a survey of embedded and connected product decision makers at global enterprises. As you can see, the respondents we surveyed were from around the world. In aggregate, a good mix of folks from North America, Western Europe, and Asia Pacific. They represent a mix of company sizes, from 500-person companies all the way up to 12% of respondents that work at companies with 20,000 or more employees. The survey respondents also come from a number of different industries, from computer and IT hardware to industrial machinery and electronics, to consumer electronics and home appliances, to automotive, aerospace, and life sciences. We asked the survey respondents a number of questions about their current views, what's driving their strategy, the challenges they face, the investments they are making, and how they measure their success. I really enjoyed working on this project with the folks at CUBE because the quantitative data that we got back validated what I'm seeing in many of my ongoing conversations with software development and design teams who I work with on a day-to-day basis at Forrester. Now, to start with, we asked the survey respondents if they agreed or disagreed with a number of different propositions about the state of the market. We wanted to get a feeling for what the top drivers were for each. Here's what we found with respect to the most important drivers. Number one, speed matters. 83% of the survey respondents agreed that quick software development and collaboration are crucial to meeting the needs of their customers. It's one of the reasons we've seen a strong shift toward agile development practices and away from the more traditional forms of software development. Number two, faster introductions of smarter products and over-the-top services are a key driver of growth, which is one of the reasons that software development needs to pick up the pace. And finally, tied for second, higher-level software tools and development frameworks are crucial to new product development. In my opinion, there are a lot of reasons for this, and we'll see what they are as we start to dive deeper into the results. But against this desire to go faster, to develop faster, is the reality of what it takes to build digital products. I use this term instead of embedded or technical products for a reason. Now, I've spent almost 30 years in the development space, including a number of years building software development products used for hardcore technical, embedded, and real-time development. And what I see happening now really feels like an evolution from that more traditional form of product development. Digital products change how we design, build, and deliver software. Why? Well, first of all, we see increasing complexity as products are part of systems and become systems of systems. And you really need to engage in systems thinking in order to correctly deliver them. We see shifting life cycles where connected products put emphasis on support, integration, and additive over-the-top services. We find that customer expectations are changing as market shifts especially as we go from tech optimists, early adopters of products, to mainstream customers as the market grows and as demand increases. Geographic distribution. We increasingly find that teams are spread across the world and remote work is unavoidable. That's especially the case given the current reality of the pandemic environment that we work in. And finally, supply chain shocks. Shortages create pricing pressures, delivery delays, and increased risk. Let's look at each of these a little bit deeper and how software product teams are responding to them. One reason we need to change the way that we do things is that as products are getting smarter, they are also getting more complex. One measure of this, now I know it's not the only one and we can debate if it's even the best one, but one measure of this is the size of the software code bases in contemporary products as expressed in lines of code. Now I've adapted some of these statistics from a few different sources and I've linked those in the slide, but since I've been in the development space, we've gone from tremendously complex products having maybe 400,000 lines of code, Space Shuttle is a good example, to 1.5 million lines of code in the F-22, to 5 million in the Mars Curiosity rover, to 10 million in the Chevy Volt, to 23.5 million in the next generation of fighters after the F-22, the F-35, to 50 million in the Large Hadron Collider, to 85.7 million in the latest version of Debian Linux, to as much as 150 million in a modern automobile. Now, when the code base has grown over 300 times in size in a complex modern digital project, or even 150 times the size of what our traditional design, development, change, and release management processes were built for, then why would we expect traditional design and development processes to help us manage rapid product introductions as the complexity of our software is growing at exponential rate? Put another way, something's got to give as the amount of code that we have to deliver and the velocity of how quickly we have to deliver it both increase. Now, speaking of the 87.5 million lines that is Debian Linux, let's take a moment and look at one of my favorite little evolutions of Debian, the Raspberry Pi operating system. I'll pick on it because unlike the Space Shuttle or the F-22 Raptor or a Tesla, it's a pretty humble little device. In this case, I've got one running on a free Pi Model 2 that I picked up from somewhere in my travels, and it's running in my house. The point is that even small, insignificant pieces of modern hardware can have incredibly complex smarts powering them. Now, the reason that I picked this example is because the devices we have in our homes are also becoming smarter and more digital. In fact, Cord Cutter News predicts that the average U.S. home will have 20 connected devices running inside it by 2025. Now, I think my new home is probably a little bit ahead of that schedule. I currently count 23 devices at the edge of my network topology, and that doesn't even count the networking devices. And I haven't even gotten around to hooking up our smart garage doors. I'll get that done someday soon. We get pinged on our watches when our laundry is done, or when I leave the refrigerator door ajar, or if the dishwasher leaks. Now, I have no idea how many million lines of code are running in my house, but as a consumer, I expect it to all integrate and work well and function as a system of systems. I also want to make a design point here. Among the reasons that I chose the networking equipment that I did was that instead of buying their network controller device for a few $100, I had the option of installing it on that spare Raspberry Pi that I had lying around. It cost me nothing more than my time to experiment and see what kind of value it could provide to me. And you know what? I loved it. I'm a developer by trade. I am not a network admin, but I'm kind of hooked. I now have more insight into how my house is working than I've ever had before. The wife doesn't yell at me about dead spots in the house anymore. We've got networking everywhere. The point is, because this particular networking vendor invested in multi-platform support, invested in open source, and invested in being able to run on a Raspberry Pi on that 87.5 million lines of Debian code repackaged as Raspberry Pi OS, They provided a whole product solution that had a very low cost of entry for me as a tech optimist. I took it, and I think at this point I've probably spent about $1,500 or more on networking equipment based on that one chance that I took, invested my time, and was able to see what their ecosystem of smart products could do. Now, that sort of experience can go the other way too. When we were building products in the good old days, you were pretty much done when developers finished off their products, checked in their code, product managers filled out the build of materials and sent it off to production. Yeah, you know, we might have to be ready to do some defect fixes, and we would keep a code stream open in our favorite source configuration management product of choice. But almost all the development team rolled on to the next major project, and we moved forward. Today, when it comes to digital products, and especially smart products that are replacing the traditional durable goods that we're used to as consumers, there's increasingly an expectation of longer duty cycles. As developers and designers, we need to be prepared for this. Those of you in the aerospace or automotive sector understand this pretty well, I'm sure. But sometimes the rest of us have to learn the hard way. Here's a good recent example. Consumer expectations are that somewhat expensive speakers should last for years. And when those expectations are violated by design and development decisions that product teams make, it can create a whiplash effect. The Sonos team found this out the hard way. I think the increasing product complexity and the changes in how product life cycles are evolving with respect to digital products are reflected in our survey data. When we ask decision makers about their technological challenges that they face when producing digital products, the top two challenges for European and North American respondents related to the difficulty of scaling software across multiple hardware targets or platforms and maintaining the software that they create across multiple hardware targets. Multi-platform issues were also a top two concern for Asia Pacific, as were quality issues that reduce customer experience or require expensive updates. As product life cycles extend, as software complexity grows, and as integration demands increase, multi-platform development is a challenge that teams need to solve. Now, shifting product life cycles aren't the only way that customer expectations are changing as digital products get smarter. The idea of evolving product value streams were once comparatively rare. In 2019, I have to admit, I did a bit of a double take where I read a story about how Tesla was adding extra range to cars that they had already sold and that were on the road in Florida in the path of Hurricane Dorian. But when you think about it, it's not so strange. For years, those of us that have embraced product line management concepts have used platforms and common hardware and software to reduce our costs while defining feature configurations to hit different price points in the market. Sometimes that requires us to lock features away in our firmware or in our software. Just ask Linksys about what it did with the WRTG54 router. And then when that particular product was discovered to have consumed open source software and the firmware was opened up, you had a whole industry of hackers that grew up around it, taking all the capabilities of the hardware, of the platform that had been created and creating upgunned routing products. It really became a cult classic, and I think that you can still buy them today on Amazon. Now, getting back to Tesla, as customers get used to these examples of product lines with features that vary and are configured in software, you can either use it to create brand loyalty or it can actually erode that brand loyalty. When Tesla unlocked the extended range, they got a lot of positive press. But when they go and they sell that same capability as an upgrade to a software lockable battery, they have to be prepared to explain to customers why they should pay for atoms that the customer already has and that they are simply blocked from using by the flip of a bit. And in Tesla's case, according to the customer community, the range unlock offer doesn't always seem to be an option. It comes and goes, like features in my Netflix client. Lack of consistency from an over-the-top software perspective, from a provisioning process, creates uncertainty and thus hesitation in when a customer should potentially purchase this upgrade. But there are also some good examples. A year or two ago, we got a note in the mail from Toyota about my wife's 2018 Camry. It said that we could bring it back to the dealer for an upgrade to the entertainment system. Turned out the upgrade was free, and it dramatically improved her experience with the car in terms of navigation, voice calls, and search. Now, she can easily use Waze, Spotify, and make hands-free calls right from her Camry. She's not what I would call a tech optimist, but it had a measurable impact on her satisfaction with the car and the Toyota brand. The 2018 Camry product team at Toyota didn't know us a thing as customers, but in the end, that didn't matter. They were able to use the capabilities of the platform that they had built, of the product family that they had created to provide after-the-fact updates and upgrades, and that made a difference. From a development point of view, we need to think about what we can do to enable an increasing stream of value with the products that we're creating through upgrades, integrations, and customizations. From a design point of view, we need to think about that experience, how we're offering it, and whether it's something that is reinforcing the value of the brand or potentially getting in the way of that brand value. In the end, the mainstream customers, as they begin to become the focus of the growth forecast that I led off the talk with, our focus on design and development of digital products needs to become more holistic. We're no longer just designing for tech optimists. Sure, at its core, we have to nail the user interface experience, and we have to nail the industrial design. Packaging, unboxing, and installation matters too, and quality, ease of maintenance, duty cycle, all play their part. But in the end, I think that the design of digital products must have enough utilitarian value to appeal to that mainstream user, not just the tech optimist. If your team's completely focused on that tech optimist, there's a risk of getting caught in the Juicero trap, where the utility value of what you've produced just doesn't cut it. Or worse, a single tech optimist streaming video of how your product fares in his shower can completely derail its launch. So, how do you get there with traditional processes and traditional organizations that place designers in one organization and developers in another, that measures them differently? How well do these traditional processes, organizations, and tools work when we have teams working around the world and remotely from home? The answer for all too many of the survey respondents that we looked at was not very well. We find that across the board, survey respondents find that a lack of geographical cohesion makes it difficult to coordinate efforts to make decisions in real time. Shared objectives are another problem, particularly for North American respondents in the survey, where 47% view it as a critical problem. This one can really bite, because even when you have a beautiful, functional, bug-free product that meets each team's individual goals, a lack of holistic focus on the business value or customer utility can doom your digital product. The third most pressing organizational challenge digital product teams face is a lack of knowledgeable resources, and that's the case across the globe. I'm going to hold on to that one a bit. You'll see it appear later on. We also looked at how survey respondents at different levels in their organization view the process challenges their teams face. Interestingly enough, we saw some significant variations. At the highest levels, respondents were concerned about completing workflows related to products that span multiple departments. Going back to the Tesla example above, a new product launch can affect how the digital service organization makes an upgrade option available. Or when a new product is launched, an operations team that builds a companion app for the mobile devices might not be ready to support it. 40% of C-level respondents and 39% of VP-level respondents called this particular challenge out. At the VP level, a lack of iterations across the development process was tied with cross-department workflows as the top process challenge at 39%. My take on this, these folks know that they need to get more agile to increase product delivery cadences, but wanting to get agile and actually becoming agile are two different things. So many things get in the way of an agile transformation: organizational resistance, siloed organizations, compliance and governance mandates, concerns about quality and security. It's really tough. At the director level, 42% of respondents said that they spend way too much time maintaining or updating the products that they have. Now, I want you to stop and think about that for a moment. Even while customer expectations around digital product life cycles are changing, and they expect longer life, and they expect lengthier support, the folks that are closest to the code can't wait to stop working on it and move on to the next big thing. It's understandable, especially when we've already seen that multi-platform development is such a challenge. But I think that we need to challenge this a little bit and ask why that's the case, and ask if there isn't an opportunity to reset the expectations of our development teams and the directors that they report up to. Because if we're not going to make adequate provision for maintenance, for updates, for value stream extension, then we're really not going to be ready to fully meet the needs or expectations of customers when it comes to digital products. Now, lastly, we found that all the respondents called out the challenge of different ways of working with software development teams. The idea that there's just not a lot of consistency, that there are different rates of change is a real challenge. Unfortunately, I wish I had an easy solution to the variance in development processes, but I don't. In fact, in the research that we've done with product teams that we've spoken to, they've embraced process variation and modified standard agile processes to recognize this reality. As a result, what we see is successful teams running at different parts of their organizations at different speeds. Roberto Ostinelli at Nido Robotics sums up the challenge that they faced. Hardware takes years, drivers and robot software, they make robotic vacuums, takes months, and cloud infrastructure takes weeks. Because of this, their teams need to support a delivery process with synchronization points between the slower moving components and those that can pivot quickly. So synchronization points become an important conception or part of their modified agile process. But keep in mind that synchronization points only work if you've invested in collaboration from a tool perspective and from a ceremonial perspective. And they only work if you enable iteration wherever it is possible. I think the right thing to think about is gears meshed to other gears. Different sized gears can work just fine, and they can mesh together as long as they have the same shape for the teeth that connect them. Another thing that we see teams doing is that they extend the period of design before starting sprints. At Virtusa, a European consulting firm that does product design for organizations, teams extend their discovery and design processes to include experience design and human-centered design. Now, these may add a few months to the start of a project, but they lead to a much better holistic design process. After they've done the initial work, then teams start spinning up on development and they go into a continuous delivery loop. Another adaptation that we see with respect to digital products is one where teams separate their efforts at the edge and their core to keep those individual efforts from blocking each other. While Philips has traditionally centralized in the Netherlands, for their edge development, it made sense to embed their software and hardware teams together in China so that they could tap local manufacturing expertise for core device hardware. By separating their edge and core efforts, even though it made for a more complex development cadence, it allowed the individual teams to run independently. Now, they needed very clear documentation and strong architectural decoupling to enable these geographically distributed teams to stay on track. One of the other things that they invested in was an event-driven digital data architecture and digital twins to help the teams operate independently. Now, the benefit that gave them was as they evolved the architecture of their firmware, of their communication bus, they were able to do that somewhat independently. At this point, or at least when I talked to them, their architecture was on its 5th generation, and yet the over-the-top services, the control software, could still work with those first-generation products that they had created that were still out there in the consumers' homes. They didn't have to turn all those devices off. They didn't have a Sonos moment, in other words. Now, not everything that product teams are dealing with today is a systemic, cultural, organizational, or process issue, or about changing customer behavior. If you're like me, you've probably seen a steady stream of electronic products in your shopping carts, phones, networking gear, maybe a TV or a washer or dryer over the past year or two. I have to say, though, it's been a bit frustrating as a consumer for the last 6 months. It doesn't seem like anything that I want to buy is particularly easy to get. I wanted to build a new desktop this spring, but try to find a good GPU or a Ryzen 5000 series processor. Even my wife was looking for a new camera for my son-in-law's birthday so he can take lots of pictures of our new granddaughter. But I had to listen to her complain about how the best price she could find online was over $300 more than the manufacturer's suggested retail price. It's pretty clear that even to the non-tech optimist consumers out there, that something is going on. The consulting firm AlixPartners, cited by the Washington Post, estimated that the global auto industry will make somewhere between 1.5 million and 5 million fewer vehicles this year than originally expected. Volkswagen alone is down 100,000 vehicles for 2021, with the situation expected to worsen in the second quarter, and they don't expect to be able to make up the difference this year. In the Car and Driver article that is on the screen, they call out some interesting reasons for the shortage in the automotive industry. Now, if you can believe them, in Taiwan, there's a water shortage because no typhoons hit the island last year, and that means that the aquifers are low and that the rainfall for the first 3 months of this year weren't very good. And because of that, we're not getting the semiconductors that we need. Man, in addition to software and changing consumer expectations and process problems, now we've got to worry about the rain in Taiwan. Man, it's tough being a product development team. Well, the reality is, in fact, we do see the results of the current semiconductor shortage in our survey. 62% of respondents either agree or strongly agree that they've been affected by this semiconductor shortage. Both GM and Ford have estimated that the hit to earnings this year attributable to chip shortages will be in the neighborhood of $1 to $2 billion. Goldman Sachs economists say that for the bulk of 2021, this shortage will translate into an inflationary tax that could result in prices rising as much as 3% in the U.S. for affected goods. That would boost inflation by as much as 0.4 percentage points for the rest of the year, the firm said. The impact here in the U.S. to GDP could be as high as a 1% subtraction from activity, but will likely be closer to a 0.5 percentage point. It's a pretty serious deal. So, there are many challenges to building digital product organizations, but nonetheless, what we see is that firms are increasingly committed to building them. I think that's mainly because business leaders see digital products as a way to develop new revenue streams and shift to services that complement their products. That's what's driving 59% of respondents in our survey. It actually reminds me of a company that I spoke with a few years ago, SnapAV. SnapAV's broad range of connected audio and communications devices are controllable from a mobile phone, by a consumer, or from a web browser, or by a professional installer. Today, they make heavy use of cloud services that connect edge to the core interaction channels. Their digital product experiences cross multiple channels with different release schedules. Now, when I spoke to their CEO in 2018, he told me that just 3 years before that, the products that they sold didn't have a single line of code in them. By the time that I talked with them in 2018 about how they were building digital products, well over half of their products had code in them. Today, they have a rapidly expanding line of multiple brands with smart digital products at the core of their business. As a result, they've done what 52% of respondents in our survey want to do. They've accelerated their shift to digital business. But I also see a bit of a catch-22 forming in the response patterns of embedded and connected product decision makers. Expansion and growth are certainly on the mind of these folks, as well as the drive for improving their product development outcomes, but so is the need to drive cost reduction and efficiency in production processes. In other words, companies want top-line growth and bottom-line efficiency. Got to tell you, it's tough to get both at the same time. It's kind of like trying to break the vertices of the iron triangle. You want more scope for less resources, and you want it on time? Hello? Are we talking the laws of physics here? Reminds me of the Rolling Stones, you know, you can't always get what you want. Or can you? I have to tell you, about 10 years ago, we saw a huge spike in the use of open source software. One reason was that it reduced software delivery costs, it increased speed, and it helped with the quality and functionality of the products that were using it. In other words, open source software acted as a force multiplier for those creative and bold enough to adopt it. In my opinion, in order to solve this catch-22, digital product teams need to look for force multipliers. They need to get creative about how they apply software, processes, and culture in order to expand the vertices of the iron triangle that they are dealing with. Okay, so what are digital product teams actually focusing on to try to achieve their twin goal of building new revenue streams and improving productivity while driving cost reduction? When we asked how important a number of different initiatives were to survey respondents, here's what we found. 55% said that creating user experiences that are intuitive and consistent were their #1 goal. That was tied with those that said that introducing new, smarter, connected products and services to market faster were also very important. Adding new features to their existing products, essentially extending the value stream. Using software libraries and tools that support multiple hardware platforms at 54%. Improving our support for existing products in market, 53%. Finding developers with up-to-date skills, 52%. Improving the efficiency of the development delivery process at 51%. Ensuring that we have an adequate supply of semiconductors and other key hardware components for our products at 49%. And accelerating the hardware and software R&D cycles. Put together, I think what this shows is a set of product teams that are generally in line and understanding what they need to do and that are trying to address the drivers that they need to in order to create more effective digital products and to get better at delivering them. Now, let's spend a little bit of time breaking down those overall initiatives and looking at a few different areas. I'd like to look at design first. When we look at the most important priorities for design, I think that they really focus on improving user experience, as we saw was the #1 increased important driver, and also by shifting left on testing, by moving it further up into the design process. So 35% of respondents think that improving testing on real hardware in all phases to validate the feasibility of their designs is a critical priority. 39% are interested in being able to create updatable, customizable user experiences by introducing things like language packs, themes, or third-party applications. This goes back to the ability to improve and increase the value stream of products after the fact. And it also, really, I think, recognizes that shift in customer expectations in terms of how they engage with and use products that they want to delight them. 21% think that improving user interface flow and navigation is a critical priority, but 78% overall think that it is either a critical or high priority, and 33% are interested in improving visual, motion, and audio assets as a critical priority. One of the other things that we are seeing is that one way to shift left in design and development is to shift and increase your focus on rapid prototyping. We find that respondents are very interested in doing that by simulating hardware and devices environments before they're actually live. 31% view that as a critical priority. Improving early stage testing, again, fairly consistent from what we see in the design period. Speeding up the process of prototyping, 29% that say that that's a critical priority, and enabling rapid iterations between design and development. 27% of respondents that say that that's a critical priority. And again, when you add that to all the folks that say that it's a high priority, you can see that the vast majority of respondents are interested in improving these capabilities, investing in these initiatives. Now, development. When it comes to the investment that teams are making in the development cycle, we see a nice mix of tactics to deal with both top-line growth and bottom-line efficiency and cost reductions. From a top-line perspective, you see a focus on over-the-top features and over-the-air software updates, a real focus on the transition to the smarter digital products that adjust to the drivers that we discussed earlier in the presentation. We see that 33% of respondents say that support for over-the-air software updates is a critical priority, and we see that 32% say creating new over-the-top features that add value is a critical priority. From a bottom line efficiency and cost reduction perspective, one of the things that I think we see is a focus on software product line management, enabling scalability across product lines from the low end to the high end, and then also a focus on investing in cross-device tools and frameworks that support multiple classes of hardware. Now, speaking of that last investment, we see that the vast majority of respondents are really focused on the value that cross-platform software libraries can provide. I think that's because cross-platform software libraries are a really good candidate for a potential force multiplier. They can increase efficiency and velocity by reducing the amount of code that teams have to write. They can also make it easier to enable a software product line management style approach through support for multiple types of hardware and firmware, making it easier to target both low-end and higher-level devices with consistent code, and even introducing some supply chain flexibility in the process. I think that's one of the reasons why the survey respondents say that cross-platform software libraries are increasingly important to them. And it's not just that the cross-platform tools are more important. The survey respondents seem to be putting their money where their mouth is. Half say that they are expanding or upgrading their investment in cross-platform tools, and another 14% plan to start investing this year. Only 3% say that cross-platform tools are not meeting their needs and are decreasing or removing them as a result. Now, I'm starting to get toward the end of my time slot, and I do want to leave time for questions. So I'm going to start my wrap up with an observation or two around what makes a digital product successful. I love the responses from the survey respondents because I think it validates so much of what I've spoken about earlier today. Polished products with great onboarding are certainly important. 56% of survey respondents agree with that, and 59% say that the installation process is a critical design point in product success. And intuitive UI also matters a lot at 56%. But the top drivers are about a different type of customer experience, what we often call the ilities, quality and reliability at 80%, maintainability at 68%, and speed and performance at 69%. As you think about the products that you design, develop, and deploy, I think you need to, what this data shows is that you need to think about the whole package, the holistic design of what you're creating in the experience that it delivers. It makes sense to me then why the ilities are important when product development decision makers are considering an investment in cross-platform tools. 42% say that security is of critical importance. 40% say that the performance of the cross-platform design and development tools is important. The focus on customer service at 39%, the expertise in the IoT space at 35%, and the long-term stability or the availability of the technology, all important things that these decision makers are looking for as they go cross-platform. And it also makes sense that when we ask them what benefits they have achieved or are hoping to achieve, just as they are looking to develop a great customer experience, they expect these cross-platform tools to help them improve their customer experience. They also expect to help improve data sharing and engagement in the partner ecosystem, essentially help with the gears meshing with other gears of different sizes on a geographic worldwide basis. They expect the tools to help reduce the overall costs of device development, help them develop new products faster, to improve time to market with new offerings, to increase product service and innovation, to support product service or innovation, and to reduce hardware costs. So to sum up, they actually expect them to help deliver on that catch-22 and they want them to be the force multiplier that they are looking for to be able to deliver both. So, to wind up, I want to thank you for being willing to listen to me today, and I want to leave you with some thoughts here. Use this data to benchmark and assess your own challenges and product development initiatives. A lot of it will be packaged up in a written report that you can get and is going to be made available to you as part of this session. Understand how the digital product lifecycle is changing and how product development teams must change with it. You need to think about your organization. You need to think about your cultural practices. You need to think about how you're working together and how your tools and technology act as force multipliers to support that changing product lifecycle. Engage stakeholders at multiple levels of your organization to understand their pain points and challenge their assumptions. In particular, challenge that assumption at the director level that looks for teams that want to get on with the next product, that wants to move on to the next development cycle. Is that really what your customers are expecting? Or are you making adequate provision for a value stream that continues for a longer period of time that meets their needs with respect to digital products? A great customer experience starts with a great user experience, a holistic experience, a design that really considers the entire life cycle of the product and how it is used. Not just the user experience, not just the unboxing experience, but the support experience and the connection and the services that enrich the product that you are creating. Take that holistic approach and move the cultural, organizational process and technology levers that are at your disposal. You'll have to move them all if you want to really solve that growth cost reduction paradox. Technology, culture, organization, measurement as well. If you do that right, what I think you'll find is that cross-platform frameworks and tools will act as force multipliers to the other changes that you are making. They are not magic bullets, but when they are paired with the other changes that you make, they will provide additional capability, they will provide additional value, and they will help you get to where you need to go when it comes to building the next generation of digital connected products. So with that, I want to thank you, and we'll go ahead and open the floor up for questions.